Canada, maple syrup and like Captain say, ay, kick your ass all hockey season, ay, Mounties be riding horses, yeah, this is Canada.
They have no view about how to build an economy of the future. Oil and gas will peak this decade. In fact, oil is probably peaking this year. And the economic plan of the Conservative Party of Canada is simply to produce more oil and gas into a market that inevitably, if we are going to fight climate change, will begin to decline. That is a ridiculous economic plan for the future of this country. It will leave Canada uncompetitive and poorer on a go-forward basis. So for all of those reasons, I am very happy to be engaging this debate, but I would encourage Mr. Poilievre and the folks that sit on the Conservative benches to at least try to tell the truth.
There you have it, guys. That was said just under 2 years ago by the then energy minister under blackface Justin. But today is Friday, March 13th. I have a great article for us today because it ties back into everything that I've been saying about Canada and how we continually elect not to use the resources that we have at hand to propel our nation, this great nation of Canada, to great heights. So we compare ourselves to Norway, a nation that has far less resources than us, a nation with 5.5 million people, and a nation that doesn't border the wealthiest nation on earth, which is the US. That's all that Canada has. But what we're doing now is we're going to Norway for advice and investments. Norway is in the news, guys, this week because it might be profiteering too much for more. That's what they're saying about the country. Its oil and gas revenues, they're so large. Its sovereign wealth fund is so enormous that $109 billion windfall from 1 year of conflict became a national political controversy. That's what they're able to complain about. Guys, Norway has a population, like I said, of 5.5 million people. Canada has 40 million. Norway has a $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund built entirely from oil and gas. Canada has the same rules. We have more resources. We're just talking about oil and gas here. Canada has far more oil and gas, far more critical minerals than Norway, but we have no fund. We have the same model, guys, but we've made systematic different choices in our recent history that have caused Canada and Norway to completely diverge on this path of wealth. That's the same logic also, mind you guys, that goes with the Arab nations. Mr. Carney, BlackRock Carney, went to the United Arab Emirates. Why? Oh, we're because of a sovereign wealth fund. Oh, we need to go to the Arab nations, oil nations, to invest in our country because they have sovereign wealth funds built from gas and oil revenues. But we have more oil than them and gas. Guys, it doesn't make sense. Let's get into the article. Prime Minister Mark Carney arrives in Oslo on Friday just as Norway is facing questions about whether the energy-rich country is once again profiteering from war. Mr. Carney will spend 3 days in Norway meeting Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store, watching a North Atlantic Treaty Organization military exercise in the country's far north and holding talks with leaders from Denmark, Iceland, Finland, and Sweden. Canadian officials said part of this discussion will focus on energy security given the spike in oil and gas prices since Israel and the United States launched airstrikes at Iran. Profiting from war has been a sensitive topic in Norway ever since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The Nordic country has been a major producer of oil and gas, and nearly all of its production is exported. Its output has become even more critical to the European Union since Brussels began cutting back on Russian imports. Norway currently supplies nearly 1/3 of the EU's natural gas needs and accounts for 14% of the bloc's oil imports. In 2024, a pair of leading economists estimated that Norway reaped a $109 billion profit in the first year of Russia's invasion, but spent only a fraction of the amount supporting Ukraine. The report sparked a public outcry, and the government responded by announcing a $30 billion program in humanitarian and military support that runs to 2030. Mr. Storr has said that Norway is now among the biggest contributors to Ukraine on a gross domestic product basis, guys. And we need to stop right here because I think this is a great place to unpack what we just read, guys. We need to sit on that number. Norway made $109 billion in profit in a single year from its oil and gas exports during the Ukraine war, guys. And the public controversy was not that Norway needed the money. The controversy was that Norway had so much of it, that keeping it felt morally questionable. That's their dilemma. That is the problem Canada should want to have, guys. Norway has been building toward this since the 1990s. Every dollar of oil and gas revenue collected through taxes on energy companies goes into the government pension fund global, not into general revenue, not into provincial budgets, into a dedicated sovereign wealth fund that now holds over $2 trillion US dollars, guys, in assets for a country of 5.5 million people. That is roughly $360K per citizen, sitting in a fund that the government can only withdraw 3% from annually. Guys, that's what I'm saying. Canada has the oil, we have the gas, we have the critical minerals. Canada has a larger population, a larger landmass, and comparable reserves, guys. What Canada does not have is the political discipline Norway exercised for 30 years to capture that revenue and protect it from short-term spending pressures, guys. Norway looked at its resources, wealth, and asked, what happens when the oil runs out? Canada looked at its resource wealth and asked what the quarterly budget requires. That is not a resource story, guys. That is a governance story. We have a serious political governance problem. All we do is we look at that short-term profit instead of looking the wider picture, how to make this country even greater, how to protect our citizens and keep elevating that standard of living from generation to generation. We don't do that. Let's keep it going. Since the war in Iran began, the government has gone to great lengths to insist that it views the military action as illegal and that Norway is not profiting from the fighting. We strongly distance ourselves from the attacks and that civilians are being hit hard more. Mr. Storr told the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation last week. Finance Minister Jens Stoltenberg recently said that the war has actually resulted in a net loss to Norway. According to Mr. Stoltenberg, any gains from an increase in the price of oil, gas and oil, have been more than offset by a drop in the value of Norway's massive sovereign wealth fund as global stock markets recoil. Norway has gone from being an oil nation to an investor nation where a significant part of our income comes from investments in the stock market, Mr. Stoltenberg told reporters this week in Oslo. Still, Norway has certainly benefited from the rising price of energy. The European benchmark for natural gas has climbed more than 60% since the first airstrikes, and Brent crude is up 40% to around $100 a barrel. Guys, we kind of need to stop here and unpack what's going on here, guys, because Norway has gone from being an oil nation to an investor nation, and that sentence is worth repeating because it describes exactly the transformation Canada never made. Canada is not ignorant to the model. Alberta has the Heritage Savings Fund. It was established in 1976, the same era Norway was building its own framework. At its peak in the early 1980s, it held around $12 billion. Today, after decades of successive provincial governments raiding it to cover budget shortfalls, instead of letting it compound, it holds roughly $20 billion. In nearly 50 years of existence, the Alberta Heritage Fund grew by $8 billion while Norway built $2 trillion, guys. That's not bad luck. That is a political choice made repeatedly over decades. Every time Alberta faced a budget pressure, the Heritage Fund was available. Every time Norway faced a budget pressure, the law said you can't touch the fund. Norway built the fence around its resource revenue and forced it for 30 years, guys. Alberta built the fence and then opened the gate whenever it was convenient, and this was not a secret. Canadian economists and politicians watched Norway's fund grow for decades. The model was documented, studied, and debated in Canada at every level of government. Canada chose not to replicate it, not because it didn't know how, but because the short-term political incentives always won over long-term sovereign wealth building, guys. And Norway is now an investor nation with $2 trillion. Canada is still having a debate about whether it can get a private company to expand oil sand production before an April 1st regulatory deadline worth $8 billion. Come on, guys. That's the difference. That's the difference. And that's political. This is all coming from politics. It's exclusively political. Our politicians never cared. Let's keep it moving, though. Nearly all the revenue the country generates from energy production through taxes on oil companies has been stashed in the GPEG since the 1990s. It has grown to the world's largest investment fund with more than $2 trillion in total assets. Around 70% of the money is invested in equities, and more than half of its stock portfolio is made up of U.S. holdings. By law, the government can only take out a small portion, less than 3% annually. But given the size of the fund, that still represents around 20% of the annual budget. Market fluctuations, therefore, can have a far more significant impact on government programs than energy prices, Mr. Stoltenberg argued. He added that the government will definitely profit from increased oil revenue. And that will become a new political issue. There will be parties to the left of the government who will be arguing that this isn't ours to keep. Guys, we need to stop here and we kind of deliberate everything we just read, because I think there's quite a bit to unpack. Norway's finance minister is defending a fund so large that 3% of it covers 20% of the entire national budget, guys. The political debate in Norway right now is whether they are keeping too much of their oil revenue during wartime. That is the sovereignty dividend from 30 years of disciplined resource wealth management, guys. Canada's political debate right now is whether Ottawa and Alberta can agree on carbon pricing before April 1st so that a profitable oil company will agree to build an expansion it already wants to build. Guys, take that in. Those two debates happening in the same week tell you everything about the distance between what Canada has and what Canada has built with it, guys. Norway is arguing about whether its $2 trillion fund is too large. Canada is arguing about regulatory paperwork. The Iran war has pushed oil prices to $100 a barrel. Brent crude is up 40% since the strikes began. Norway is capturing the windfall into a fund that will outlast the conflict, outlast the oil, outlast the politicians who build it. And Canada is watching oil prices swing by $30 in a day and hoping private companies will invest enough to get extra barrels out the door. Carney is in Oslo this weekend talking to Norway about energy security. He is meeting the prime minister of a country that turned the same resource Canada has into the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. The question Canadians should be asking is not what they discussed. It is why Canada spent 30 years watching Norway do this and just elected not to follow suit. Guys, this is really why all of this matters to Canadians, is because Norway has 5.5 million people. It's a little larger than Alberta. And a $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund. They have a sovereign wealth fund the size of the Canadian economy, guys. That's the comparison. They have a sovereign wealth fund the size of the Canadian economy. Canada has 40 million people and the same oil and gas resources. We have more. We have more oil and gas than them. We have more critical minerals than them as well. I mean, we have so many critical minerals. Norway used their resources to build that fund. The difference is not the resource, guys. The difference is the decision made in the 1990s about what to do with the revenue. Canada made a different decision repeatedly, and at the federal level and at the provincial level, we just keep not doing what we need to do. We do not build sovereignty in Canada. None of our governments did. Conservative, liberal, none of them. Provincial, we can add the NDP in there. None of them. Or if you want to go to Quebec, the Bloc didn't do anything about it. The Liberals didn't do anything about it. They have a bunch of natural gas in Quebec. They're not touching it. They're not extracting it. Why? The sovereign wealth fund model, guys, was studied and shelved in Canada. And now Canadians are watching oil hit $100 a barrel during a Middle East conflict while the Prime Minister flies to Oslo to meet the country that got it right. Norway's problem this week is that it might be too wealthy from oil. Canada's problem this week is that it cannot get its own industry to build. That gap did not happen by accident, guys. It happened by choice, and we chose not to think about our future. That's the biggest difference. That's all I have for you guys today. Hope you guys liked today's episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. And honestly, leave as many comments in the comment section below. I love getting back to you. I love hearing what you guys think. I think this is really a key topic affecting all Canadians because we know how rich we are with the natural resources. We have more oil and gas than Russia. We have more oil and gas than the Saudis. We're literally eclipsed by like Venezuela right now. So why do we not have these capacities? Why do we not have any of this? Why is our standard of living falling? That's the question we need to be asking ourselves. Till next time, guys, stay informed, stay curious, and God bless Canada.